is y'all's first time being a part of one of these virtual classes, we want to welcome you. My name is Jeb Beasley. I am the East Tennessee field rep for the Tennessee Wildlife Federation and our Hunting and Fishing Academy. So let's get into the meat of what we're here to talk about tonight. We're here to talk about catching catfish. So I assume that the most of you guys, like I said, you have some experience, but by the end of this class, what our hope is that at a minimum, you should be able to name the 3 species of catfish commonly found in Tennessee. We want you to be able to identify 2 common baits used for catfish, and then recall a common fishing strategy used to catch catfish. And so we're going to try to track some of this. Some of this might be review for some of it might be brand new. And we might get into some more in-depth stuff, but at a minimum, this is kind of what we want you guys to walk away from. So we're going to track that. We're going to have our next little poll question, I think, come up here next. Yeah, so we're going to launch a little poll here. And one of the things that you'll see is that it's just going to be a few short little questions. So if you guys could take just a minute and scroll through those, we really appreciate you taking the time to answer those for us. These are a great way for us to understand how effective we are being and how we teach these virtual classes. So you're going to take this little knowledge check right here, and then at the end, you're going to take a similar one, and it's just going to help us determine whether or not there's any big gaps that we need to address. We want to make sure that what we're doing here is effective and that you guys are actually learning what you want to learn. So this is a great tool for us to be able to kind of look at that and say, yeah, there's some gaps here. We need to address that. Or, okay, yeah, it seems like everybody's getting it. So if you want to take some time and fill that out, we really appreciate it. And again, these aren't meant to be hard. It's just meant to kind of give us a good understanding of y'all's knowledge and where we need to go. So some of this might seem kind of review for some of you. And if you have more advanced questions, by all means, throw those at us. We'd be happy to talk about those as well. All right. I'm going to give that just a few more seconds. Looks like most everybody has got it done. I'm going to leave it up for another 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, so looking on my end, it looks like most of you guys did pretty well on this. There might be a few gaps that we need to address going throughout the class tonight. So I will make sure that we do that there at the end. And like I said, once we do our second knowledge check, we'll see if you guys learned anything. All right, so let's get into what we're talking about. Tonight, we've got a very special guest with us here who's going to help walk us through this. Captain Richard Sims of Scenic City Fishing Charters is here with us. If you guys watched the catfishing class last year, you'll remember Richard. He helped us teach it. This is what he does just about every day. So he knows his stuff. He's excited to be here, and I'm excited for him to be here to kind of learn a few things as well. So Richard, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you kind of walk us through the class tonight. And then I'm going to keep an eye on the question and answer page. And if it seems like we've got something pressing, I might jump in and we'll address it as we go.
Sounds good, Jeb. Thank you. I appreciate you having me and allowing me to do this. Catfish are near and dear to my heart. I started out like a lot of fishermen. Of course, obviously I fished for bluegill, and then I was a hardcore bass fisherman, but it's probably about, I don't know, 30, 35 years ago when I started catfishing more seriously, and caught my first ever 30-pound catfish. And as soon as I did that, I realized, okay, this is what I want to do. They are, they're some of the biggest fish that swim in Tennessee waters. And as I tell everybody, when you get a catfish bite, you don't know if that fish is going to weigh 1 pound or 100 pounds, and all points in between. So that's what makes them so exciting. I don't have a script. I'm going to do a lot of, let my PowerPoint presentation be my guide and bounce around a little bit. But we're going to go through it. We're going to talk a little bit about species, bait, tackle, and techniques. That question y'all answered. Hopefully, one of the 3 species you picked was a flathead. And this is a really good picture of flathead. because it's very obvious in that fish on the right, especially why they're called flatheads. They got a wide, narrow head, and they're very distinctive looking fish. A lot of people say they're the best eating of any of the catfish. But the three basic species are channel catfish on top. I don't need to read the description. You can read it for yourself. They're generally smaller catfish. In Tennessee River, if you catch a 10 to 15 pound channel catfish, that's huge. It's big. Most channel catfish you catch are generally going to be, 2 or 3 pounds. One little interesting fact on that particular channel cat, you see he's got little black dots on him. Channel catfish are kind of like deer. When deer are babies, they got white spots on them. Channel cats, when they're still immature, they've got black spots on them, like that one. But when they mature and get older, they lose those black spots. The flathead catfish is next that we talked about. They are probably the least common in Tennessee River. There's still a lot of them, but they're probably the least common of the three species. And then there's blue catfish. And blue catfish are, if you're a trophy catfisherman, that's probably your primary target. They're the ones. We had a new state record caught just last year in the Cumberland River. Actually, it was 100 and I'm drawing a blank here. Was it 116 or 118? It was either 116 or 118 pounds. I don't know which. I'm confusing the two, but you catch fish that weighs 116 or 118 pounds. You've got something. You got something special. Bait. You often hear catfishermen refer to people say, "Well, what do you like using for bait?" And a catfisherman's just going to answer, I like, quote, cut bait. And when a catfisherman says cut bait, it means he's taken another fish species. In this case, it's a bluegill, and he has cut that other species up into smaller pieces. And it might be bluegill, it might be skipjack, any kind of shad, skipjack, gizzard shad, sometimes even threadfin shad, if you catch those, yellow bass, white bass. You can take any other fish. I tell everybody all the time, the only thing a catfish wants to eat, especially a blue catfish, is dead meat. And he doesn't care much what kind it is. I will address this question. I don't have a slide for it, but a lot of people ask, can you use a game fish, such as a bluegill, for bait? And the answer is yes. In Tennessee, you can use game fish for bait as long as that game fish is legally caught. This is a pretty big bluegill. If you caught this bluegill throwing a cast net, you could not legally use it for bait. But if you catch it with a rod and reel, then absolutely yes, you can use it for catfish bait. The catch in some cases, let's say, for instance, you want to take a largemouth bass or a crappie and you want to cut it up and use it for catfish bait. I recommend not doing that because those fish have a size limit on them. They have to be a certain size before you can legally catch them. And there's also a law that says you cannot disfigure a fish while you're on the water to the point that a game warden can't determine whether or not that fish was a legal size. And so if you cut up a crappie or you cut up a largemouth bass, a game warden can't tell if it was the legal size or not. So I recommend not doing that. I recommend only using fish that do not have a size limit on them and that you legally catch with a rod and reel. Other baits, of course, on the left is skipjack, which is probably the #1 preferred bait by most cat fishermen. You have to catch those with a rod and reel. The reason they are highly sought after and highly preferred is that they're a very oily fish. And because they're a very oily fish, when you put them in the water, that oil is coming out just like you dripped motor oil in the water. And they're a very oily fish, so they're putting out a lot of scent. That oil is drifting downstream and hopefully attracting catfish. So that's probably the #1 bait for a lot of cat fishermen, especially trophy cat fishermen, the folks that are catching or fishing for those 40, 50, 60, 70-pound fish. But I also tell people all the time that if it wasn't for chicken breast, I wouldn't be able to be a catfish guide, because you can't always catch skipjack. You can always go to the grocery store and get chicken breast. And I've caught a lot of trophy catfish on chicken breast, and I've caught thousands and thousands and thousands of catfish on chicken breast. It's tough. It doesn't come off the hook, and you can refreeze it if you don't use it all. It's one of my favorite baits. I prefer cut bait, especially skipjack, if I'm specifically fishing for trophy fish. But if I'm just wanting to catch fish to put in the freezer, or if I'm just wanting my clients to have a lot of fun and keep their rods bent, you're going to find chicken breast in my boat just about every time. Chicken livers is a very well-known catfish bait. I hate it. I haven't had a chicken liver in my boat in years, because you can't hardly keep it on the hook. It catches catfish. Don't get me wrong. Catfish love it, especially channel catfish. It's fantastic if you can keep it on the hook. Just because it's messy and hard to keep on the hook, then you're going to usually see me using the boneless chicken breast.
Richard,
Okay.
we did have one question. It might be good to address here now. Is somebody had asked? They watched the class last year, and they switched over to using chicken breasts instead of chicken livers, and said it works a little bit better, but they still had some trouble keeping it on the hook. Did you have any additional suggestions, or maybe something that you could say that kind of could help address that issue?
I've really never had a problem with it myself. The one time I have had a problem is perhaps depending on how you're cutting the chicken breast. It's got a grain in it, and if you cut it with the grain and you just hook the internal portion of the breast and hook it with the grain of the meat, it might have a tendency to fly off sometimes. I throw a few pieces off every now and then, but if I cut it against the grain and I specifically put the hook through the external membrane of the breast, that external membrane's a little bit tougher than the internal grain. So I will specifically put my hook through an external portion, the outside of that chicken breast, that seems to be a little bit tougher and keeps it on a little bit better.
How big of pieces are you cutting that chicken breast up into when you're throwing it out?
It's going to vary. That's one of the reasons I like it. It's going to vary based upon the depth of the water I'm fishing and the way I'm fishing it, and also the size of the fish I expect to catch. But generally speaking, I'm going to say I'm going to be using a piece. Everybody can see me, can't they, Jeb?
They should be. Yep.
Yeah. I'm generally going to use a piece. This is a Gatorade top. Anything from that up to like a ping pong ball. Just a chunk about that big. And, you know, like I say, I'm probably closest comparison is going to be a ping pong ball. But there's times when I'm fishing in a area where I know there's some bigger fish, or if I'm fishing in deeper water and I want that chicken to sink better, that, you know, I may put a chunk out there that's, you know, maybe depending on the size of the breast, a fourth of the breast. But roughly, I'd say I'm usually fishing now, if I'm fishing an area and I'm trying to catch little channel cats, you know, I'm going to be using a real small piece, you know, for channel cats. Channel cats have a lot smaller mouth. And, but if I'm just trying to catch a bunch of little eater channel cats for somebody, then yeah, I'm going to be using a lot smaller bait. But usually I'm targeting blue cats, and I'm going to be trying to hit something in that ping pong ball size or maybe a little bigger.
Had a couple other quick questions just before we play the video. Somebody had asked bait specifically. You know, they have those stink baits you can buy in the store, and then somebody else also mentioned, you know, red Jello and hot dogs. So I mean, there's all kinds of stuff I'm sure that could work. But I mean, what's your experience with those specifics?
My experience is I prefer taking it straight out of the package and not doing anything to it. I don't age it. I don't let it sit out and age. I don't soak it in anything. You know, I use it straight out of the package. And I've had times when I've been in the boat with people and they've prepared their chicken breast and let it soak in one of those special bait concoctions. And you know, I have never experienced a situation when I could definitively tell that the raw chicken breast straight out of the package didn't perform about as well as any preparation I've ever seen. The one difference it does make that I will always tell about any scent or anything you use, if it gives you more confidence, then use it. Because a lot of times the key to catching fish is being confident. And if you're confident, then you're going to fish harder and you're going to fish longer, which means you're going to catch more fish. So if preparing your bait gives you more confidence, then by all means do it. A catfish isn't going to turn it down, but do I do it? No, I don't.
Okay. Got a few more questions, but for the sake of time, we'll keep moving, and then we'll try to address some of these at the end.
So I was saying skipjack's the favorite, and you know, the only place to get, I mean, some bait shops sell it now, but boy, it's expensive. You pay $4 or $5 a piece for a skipjack in most of the bait shops I know. So to catch it, the best place to catch it on the Tennessee River, Cumberland River, is often in the tailwaters immediately below a dam. In this case, we're downstream from Nickajack Dam.
For Scenic City Fishing Charters, we got Mr. Joe Jellison, Chack Cats on the left, the little short guy. And the tall guy is Ty Conkle, Captain Ty Conkle. And we've been catching them one right after another. But now that we roll video, we'll probably quit catching them. Show them the cooler.
There's some evidence.
There's some evidence. Catch us one, Ty. Show them how it's done.
That's the stuff that happens when the camera is rolling. Well, that sun just went away.
Captain Joe got us one there.
So here in a second, we're going to show you the lure we're using in this particular case, and I'll talk about that a little bit more.
Misty brought in the boat.
Come on. We're gonna do it. There we go.
There we go. Don't lose him, Ty. Don't lose him.
I'm an expert at losing them.
We love catching bait. Catching bait's almost as much fun as catching catfish.
Doubled up.
I don't know about that.
Ty says he doesn't know about that. Anyway, that's what we do to get catfish bait for y'all. Show them that lure.
This is the Foley spoon.
The old Foley spoon on a Carolina rig. Just throwing her out there.
Yep.
Figured out where they are, which is the trick. But we've definitely figured out where they are today.
So Foley spoons in this case, a lot of people who fish saltwater especially have heard of a sabiki rig. Sabiki rigs are really good. A lot of people just use little tiny white crappie jigs. You know, anything that looks like a tiny minnow, a skipjack is going to eat. And the deal about skipjack, you got to strike while the iron is hot. Skipjack, they just kind of run. They just kind of show up at certain times of the year below dams on Tennessee River or Cumberland River. And they're not there all the time. And sometimes they'll be there 2 or 3 weeks and then poof, they're gone. And so a lot of times when the skipjack are running pretty good, you'll see a lot of catfishermen ganged up below dams trying to stock their freezers with skipjack. One reason I like catfishing, this is a junky old box, but this is my basic catfish box. I got hooks of various sizes. I got sinkers of various sizes. I got 2-way swivels and I got 3-way swivels, and you know, and that's pretty much it. You know, I mean, you can forget going out and buying tackle boxes full of, you know, $6 and $8 and $10 bass fishing lures and having a tackle box that's worth, you know, $500. It really doesn't cost too much to get going catfishing. It's pretty basic. So when you get those hooks and swivels and sinkers and all that kind of stuff, how do you want to rig them up for your fishing? And it depends totally on what style of fishing that you're doing. This is not a great picture. I apologize for the picture, but you know, it's what I had handy. And this is a basic rig that I use when I'm anchor fishing. Let's see if I can do this without messing up. So can you see my pointer, my hand? Okay. So, you know, this is a typical 3-ounce bank sinker. You don't have to use this little sliding swivel. That allows you, if you want to change the sinker and go from a 3-ounce sinker to a 5-ounce sinker or down to a 1-ounce, makes it real easy to change your sinker without retying. But it slides up and down the line so that if a catfish takes the bait and starts swimming off, that line is just going to slide through there. He's not going to feel that 3-ounce weight. He's just going to swim off and get hooked. It's on a 2-way swivel. I'm using a 3-ounce weight is kind of my go-to weight. Sometimes I'll go smaller, sometimes I'll go bigger, but a 3-ounce weight is usually pretty basic. The sinker slide, a 2-way swivel. My main line is typically going on the reel to fishing rod. It's typically either 30-pound line or 40-pound line. My leader going from the swivel to the hook is 60-pound leader. I started out years and years ago using smaller leader, but I lost too many big fish. So I'm usually going to use either a 5-aught or a 7-aught hook. One thing you have to know when you're buying hooks is different brands, the 5-aught and 7-aught are not consistent. So a 7/0 Daiichi hook might be the same size as a 10/0 in another brand, or vice versa. So just because you buy a 5/0 Eagle Claw, that doesn't mean that a 5/0 Gamakatsu is going to be the same size. Typically, the hook size is most important depending upon what size bait you're going to put on it. You got to put a bait on there and you still have that gap, that hook point exposed, so that, and if I put a great big bait on that 5/0 hook, I might cover up most of the hook, including the point. So your hook size is really determined just as much by the size bait you're going to put on it, more so than the size fish. Somebody mentioned at one point in time asking about knots. I'm going to embarrass myself just a little bit right here and tell you I only know how to tie one knot. I tie an improved clinch, or some people call it an improved cinch knot, and I use it for everything. I've done it for 30 years, and an improved clinch knot works for everything. It even works on braid for me. There's a ton of other knots. You're welcome to learn them, but if you learn to tie an improved clinch knot, then it's going to work for you. All you got to do is go on YouTube and search it on YouTube, how to tie an improved clinch, and you're going to find 1,000 videos that teach you how to do that. One thing I do sometimes that I have not done in these photographs, and a lot of cat fishermen do, is they use a snell knot to tie their hook on. And snell is spelled S-N-E-L-L. And that's when you run the main line, through the hook eye, and then you wrap the line around the shank of the hook several times and tie it off. And it probably does give you a little bit more knot strength. And some people say it will help you hook more fish. I'm old, I'm lazy. I don't spend a lot of time tying snell knots on my hooks, and I feel like I do just fine. But while you're going on YouTube to learn how to tie an improved clinch, you should also search out how to tie a snell knot, or how to tie a hook using a snell knot, because a lot of cat fishermen believe in snell knots. This is when I'm vertical fishing. Basically, if you've ever been on a deep sea fishing trip and the captain just tells you to drop your line straight down to the bottom over the side of the boat, I catfish a lot like that. I'm not anchored. I'm letting the boat drift, or I'm even moving around with a trolling motor. I'm just trying to keep that bait completely vertical. And I use a 3-way rig. And this is the 3-way rig. And you can see I've got a long leader going to my sinker and a short leader going to my hook. So that means when that sinker hits the bottom, the hook and the bait is actually going to be about 1.5 feet or 2 feet off the bottom. And that helps with two things. It helps you avoid snags, and also presents the bait better for the fish, where the fish is laying down there on the bottom behind a piece of structure. So it's, again, 3-ounce weight. It's called a 3-way swivel. I love using braided line when I'm drift fishing or vertical fishing. Braided line gives me a whole lot better feel for the bottom. I can feel that sinker every time it taps the bottom. I know exactly when I'm on the bottom, and braided line really helps with that. I never use braided line when I'm anchor fishing, because braided line, when you're anchor fishing, a lot of times your line's kind of laying flat on the bottom, going over a rock or a drop off, and braided line under tension cannot withstand a sharp rock. You know, if it's laying on the bottom, you have a catfish hit and that braided line's going over a rock, that braided line's going to break every time, just like, you know, cutting butter. But when you're fishing vertical and your line's not laying across the bottom and across the rocks and all, it's great. Same thing, 60-pound mono leader. And it is basically, for you bass fishermen, it's basically a drop shot where the sinker's below the hook. I have a particular technique I'm using when I'm fishing in the tailwaters. We refer to it as our light tackle technique. You'll see this line doesn't have a sinker on it. I tell folks, use as little weight as possible, up to and including no weight. And that's where I really like the chicken, because a chunk of chicken is dense. It's denser than water and it will sink. And I will free drift with the current. If the current's relatively light, I'll free drift with the current, just throw a piece of chicken out there on a plain line and hook and drift with a slack line. I want a bow in my line. I want my line kind of slack, and that allows that chicken to sink to the bottom and it floats along with the current just like a feather. And the analogy I use is that if you take a feather and you put a little split shot, little BB split shot on that feather and you drop it, it doesn't look anything like a feather anymore. That feather just goes, whoop, whoop, you know. But if you take that feather and don't put any weight on it, and it just drifts through the air, just drifts down, and just like a feather would. And I believe bait drifting through the water is the same thing. As soon as you attach any kind of weight to it, it does not drift the same. It does not drift as naturally as a natural dead fish would float through the water. So fishing with as little weight as possible or no weight is a fantastic presentation, and I guarantee it will get you more bites. I use 20-pound braided line or 10-pound mono. The reason is because those lines are the same diameter. So being the same diameter is what allows that chicken to sink. I use 20-pound mono leader. The only reason I use the mono leader with the braided line is because if you do get hung up on the bottom, then you can't hardly break braid, and that mono will break. It also helps you avoid some line twist with that two-way swivel. My preferred hook is a 3/0 Kale hook. Note the spelling on Kale. I think it's a Swedish word. And you can see the profile on that hook, how the hook point is right in line with the eye of the hook. So when it's drifting along the bottom, it's far less likely to get hung on the bottom than a standard J hook. Like I said, I get in the current, I turn the boat sideways, just drifting downstream with the current, and I make a long cast upstream and just let that chicken float behind me on a slack line. And I prefer current running so that I'm drifting at about 1.2 to 1.5 miles per hour. And I'm covering a lot of water, you know. Okay, where do you want to fish? Anywhere but a smooth bottom. For serious fishermen, electronics with mapping is critical. I'd say, as it says here, catfish are like trout. They're looking for an ambush point. They're looking for a place they can lay out of the current. you know, a rock ledge that blocks the current, but they can sit there and watch for stuff that's floating downstream. In this particular map image, you can see that there's a hump that runs across the river, and it's 45 feet deep, but down below it, it's 62 feet deep. So this ledge right here with the current running downstream is a perfect place for catfish to get behind this hump and hide from the current, and just waiting for stuff to drift down. If there's any of you folks that have catfished a lot, and especially that 25% who have catfished a whole lot, you might recognize this map and where I grabbed that screen grab from. I'll be curious to know if anybody recognizes it. Techniques that I use: anchor or bank fishing. Basically, the premise here is you're sitting in one spot. You're not moving. You're trying to get the catfish to come to you instead of you going to them.
Old Bill's got that rod pumping down pat. Pull that rod up, reel down. Pull that rod
As I
up.
pull it up, it just pulls the line back out.
Just for looks, right?
Old Bill's got him a little closer now. He's putting some heat on him. Putting some heat on him.
I think it's the same now as when I started, and I think I've reeled 10,000 strokes.
And how long ago was that?
Yesterday. Or more. Good Lord! My God! That's a monster! Good
Tail and first,
God!
right?
Did you
Tail
see
or
that?
Hey, Richard, you want tail or head first?
Head first,
Okay.
ideally, but you want to get him however you can. But the fish isn't done. Don't rush it.
The thing is a huge. Good God! How big is that, Richard?
I don't know. We'll find out, hopefully. All right, there you go.
Oh.
Point that. Now, hang on. I'll come up there and help you here in a minute.
Oh! Thing's longer than the boat.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Yeah.
We're gonna need a bigger boat.
All right, we'll be back in a minute once we get this fish in here. Hang on.
So that right there is what it's all about. That's why catfishing is so special. You can go ocean fishing a whole lot for a whole long time and not catch fish anywhere near that big. That's the special thing about it. Drift fishing, and this is, you know, I'm fishing similar areas, but I want to cover water. I don't want to sit in one spot. I'm not a good anchor fisherman because I'm not patient. You know, anchor fishermen, they'll set up in a spot and they'll sit there 2, 3, 4 hours just waiting on big fish to come to them. I'm not good at that. I like to move, you know, and so a lot of times I like to drift around, even up on the lake, either trolling motor or current, but I'm fishing vertical. I'm fishing straight down. This is a example of fish caught there. A lot of times when I'm doing that, I'm using spinning tackle instead of casting tackle. You know, still trying to use pretty big stuff. You'll see that's braided line instead of mono.
No, I was gonna loosen it just a touch.
Yeah.
Everything I've gained is gone.
What do you think about that fish?
That is amazing. That is gigantic. hand or what?
Yes, I need a hand.
Holy smokes! Yeah. Whew. Oh, good Lord.
Oh, good Lord is what I say.
Oh my
Holy
God.
mackerel.
So I'm telling myself right there, you know, that I had not in recent, at the particular time of year, I hadn't been catching a lot of big fish. That's the bottom line. I've been catching a lot of good eaters, but I hadn't been catching a lot of big fish. And I didn't carry my net that day. I didn't have my net with me. So as you saw, we had to land that fish by hand. But, you know, that was just drifting around with that line straight down, just bumping the bottom. Actually, and I think he caught that one on the bluegill, actually, just so you know. So this is my drift fishing technique. Generally, when I have more current, typically I'm fishing in the tailwaters of mostly Chickamauga Dam, but I've done it at Watts Bar, Nickajack. You pick any dam on Tennessee River or Cumberland River, and you can do this. In this case, I'm almost in downtown Chattanooga. We'll show you how this works.
Trying to get us doubled up here. Well, I better go like this. Oh my gosh! Woo! He almost took my head off. Wow!
I think there's a couple catfish.
I better hold this. We might get a triple. Ooh, son, he destroyed that. Kyle, how big's that one? He's about 4 or 5 pounds.
4 or 5
I
pounds.
felt it thump, and I thought, did Chris do that?
Yeah, I saw that bite. I got out of the way quick. That was about to be really bad for me. Oh, we got a triple! We got a triple!
Oh my
Yeah! 1, 2, and look at this. Number 3. Let's see if we can get all in this in here. Look at this. We have a triple. Unbelievable. There's one. Kyle's got his over there.
So
Got one
I,
right here.
I do this, you know, because I like action. I like bent rods, and you won't find a technique that's going to get you more bent rods than this particular technique. It varies throughout the year, of course. I don't do it a lot in the winter, but you know, springtime starting right now, and all the way through the summer into fall. You know, and you can load a live well in a hurry, you know, when you hit the right day in the right current. A lot of it's dependent on how they're generating through the TVA dams, how much water they're releasing. But you hit the right day and you can have a lot of fun. But I have caught a lot of trophy fish doing this. The biggest I've caught on the exact same tackle you saw us using there is probably 60 pounds. You know, 20 and 30 pound fish are not terribly unusual using this technique. So just because it's a technique that's best for keeping rods bent and catching a lot of quote eaters, you can still catch trophy fish. Oh, this is another one. Sorry. Yeah, this is a demonstration of that.
That's a horse. Oh, Jeff's got a horse. He hadn't caught many today, and every one he's caught's been the smallest one of the day, but
I said I was only waiting on one. This could be him.
look the bend in that rod. Holy you got that rod bent over. Come on, drag.
I've got a particular saying I always tell clients when we hook a big one on this tackle. And that saying is that it is patience over power. With those other big bank fishing rods, you know, 40-pound test line and 60-pound leaders, you can overpower a fish. But on this light tackle, you can't overpower a fish. You just got to last longer than he does, or she, as the case may be. But the light tackle gets you more bites.
All right, I got video. I'm going for the net. Got 50 or 60 pound fish down there.
I forgot I had this one tacked onto this video. I hadn't watched it all the way through in a while.
So close.
This is
So close.
He just does not want to come up.
this is a 60-pound fish.
Okay, now we're gonna try to land this big boy by hand.
And again, I don't have the net.
Golly bum. Oh, now he's in the boat.
Me and Dakota battled this beast for more than an hour. About an hour and 5 minutes on 10-pound test line. Now you've caught fish this big before, Dakota.
Yes, I have.
How is this one different?
This one was different because we was using light tackle. It didn't take 5 minutes to reel this one, and it took over an hour.
And you can see we're right in tailwater of Chickamauga Dam. We didn't hook this fish where we are right there. Like you said, we fought it for an hour. It was hooked right up by the dam, and we ended up about 3/4 of a mile downstream before we got it in the boat. But if you told me that I could only fish one way for one thing for the rest of my life, this is what I'd do. This light tackle drift fishing for catfishing, for catfish. There's nothing like it.
Thank you, Richard. And like I said, we got a lot of questions we're going to try to work through here. But before we do that, let's go ahead and knock out this last little knowledge check just to see where we're at. Make sure there's no gaps we're missing. So you'll notice these are the same questions that we did before. So go ahead and just try to click through those. And once seems like most everybody's got it done, we'll kind of walk through each question. Just make sure everybody's on the same page. And then we'll answer some more questions. All right, so far so good. You guys look like you know what you're talking about. All right, I'm gonna leave it up for just another 3, 2, get your answers in, and 1. All right, so let's walk through these real quick. Select the 3 species of catfish commonly found in Tennessee. We've got our blues, channels, and flatheads. Y'all got that one right. Good job. Number 2. You and a friend are planning to catch some catfish. Which baits are you most likely to use? Chicken breast and skipjack. You know, we've talked about a lot of other things as in addition to those. But as Richard has said, you know, that's kind of the primarily that's what he's going to be using, those 2, chicken breast and skipjack. And we got a couple other bait questions there. I'm sure there's almost an endless list of what you could catch a catfish with. But those are the 2 we talked about tonight. And then that last one there, which of the following is a common strategy for targeting catfish? Y'all got it. It is drift fishing. So good job. Thank you guys for taking some time to answer that. Now, let's answer some of y'all's questions. All right, Richard. So going back to what we were talking about earlier on bait, I'm just going to go through these as they went into the queue. So if y'all have more questions, just keep sending them in until we run out of time. So all right, got a couple other questions on bait. I've heard of folks using spam and they swear by it. What do you think?
It works great. I know a lot of big catfish being caught on spam. I know a lot of fishermen who will keep a couple of cans of spam in the boat just in case they're out there fishing for something else, crappie, or crappie or bass or bluegill or whatever. And all of a sudden they decide, let's do some catfishing. They always got a can of spam in the boat. The downside of spam is that it's kind of soft, especially if it's warm, it's kind of soft and mushy. It's real easy to throw it off when you're casting. If you whip a rod too hard, it's a little bit tough to keep on the hook sometimes. But if you keep it on the hook and put it out there, then by golly, yes, a catfish will eat it.
All right. What about using some type of noise or vibration when it comes to bait?
that's kind of been the rage the last 5 years. You know, there's a little deal out there called a demon dragon that a lot of people put on their hook line, you know, and it's got a little rattle inside of it. So when it's sitting down there on the bottom and the current's making that line and that bait move around, it's going to have a little rattle to it.
All right.
I'm not gonna lie. I I don't have any, never used any. Don't think that much about it, but there's a lot of hardcore catfishing people out there who swear by it. And you know, they swear it makes a difference. They swear it helps. They catch more catfish because of it. The one thing I do know is that some of these things, these certain types of manufactured things, you know, you pay $7, $8, $9 a piece for them, you know, and you hang up on the bottom, you know, and you got to break that thing off. It's just like losing bass lure. There are ways to make them that do the same thing, and they aren't nearly as expensive. So you might want to do some Googling on that. But I don't do it. I'm not a fan of it. It's just more stuff I have to do. It's like tying snell knots and all of that. I'm lazy, and I just don't think it makes that much difference personally. But I know in certain catfishing networks, I would be in the minority.
Good to know. Let's see. Are lead sinkers legal in Tennessee? So we've talked a lot about that. You want to answer that real quick, Richard?
Yes, they absolutely are. I don't know. As far as I know, I don't know. There's some other states that are, especially California, that's freaking out about lead. You know, as long as it's locked up in the system and not getting ground up into little tiny shavings that's floating around, I don't think some lead on the bottom is that big a deal. But it's getting to be an issue in a lot of places, and it's something people need to be cognizant of and be careful with, and you know, don't be chunking it out there and losing it indiscriminately. But yes, it's absolutely legal in Tennessee, not a problem.
All right, we mentioned this kind of briefly, I think, but we had a question about like if you're going out to buy a rod for catfishing, what are you looking for? Rod and reel setup, maybe real fast. You know, if you're going to go out to Bass Pro or Academy and you're wanting to buy, you know, a setup for catfishing, what are you looking for?
It depends on the style of fishing I'm doing. You know, I kind of went through the 3 basic styles of fishing I'm using. Anchor fishing, I'm looking for big sticks. You know, I'm looking for the same kind of rods some people would use when they go deep sea fishing. There's certain brands I like and I use, but you'll find a bunch of different brands in my boat. I'm not married to any of them in particular, but one brand I believe in when it comes to catfishing is ugly sticks. Ugly sticks they're tough as nails. I've got ugly sticks in my boat that I've been using for 20 years, and I can't tear them up, you know. As far as reels, one of the sayings that I use all the time, and I tell people, the most important thing about successfully landing big trophy fish is not the rod and reel, it's the person holding it. You know, if you know how to fight big fish and you know the limits of your equipment, like you saw that 60-pound catfish that we caught on 10-pound test mono, took us an hour, but we caught it. It's the person holding the rod and the reel, not the rod and reel. That said, a brand of reel that I like in particular is Okuma. I have a lot of confidence in Okumas. They have good drag systems that I've found, and they're tough. They hold up for a long time in my experience.
All right, let's talk about, let's see. You mentioned quite a bit about fishing below dams. Can you catch much on the upriver side of the dam, up above a dam?
Absolutely. It's a seasonal scenario in a lot of cases. And we fish both. You know, we fish up on Chickamauga Lake, that one drift fishing catfish. Y'all saw the Sequoia nuclear towers in the background. You know, that's a popular catfishing spot because there's a lot of good structure on the bottom. And so yeah, we fish up on the lake a lot. We got a milk run, you know, of ledges and humps and bluffs, and you know that if we got a 4 hour trip, we know, you know, okay, we're gonna go hit this spot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you know, and we're gonna and but sometimes of the year we probably spend more time in tailwaters than we do up on the lake. And just I just have a lot of confidence in tailwaters. They're highly productive. Just a lot of life down there, a lot of bait, you know, and you've got to learn how to deal with the current. Some people don't like it because of the current, but as long as you learn how to deal with the current and use the current rather than fighting against the current, then tailwaters are wonderful places to fish.
Excellent. All right, we got a kind of a two-part question. It was two separate ones. I'm going to make it into one. Um, part one being, do catfish ever create beds near the bank? And then part two of that being, if you're fishing from the bank, do you use the no weight technique when there's lots of bigger rocks and debris around?
Number one, yes, catfish definitely bed near the bank. You know, there are certain times of the year, riprap banks, channel catfish, in particular, love those riprap banks. Channel catfish also love to raid bluegill beds. You know, if you find a bluegill bed and you're fishing it, there's a good chance you're going to catch channel cats too. So absolutely, even when they're spawning, they're looking for holes near the bank. So yeah, catfish go shallow a lot. That's definite. A lot of people I know in Kentucky Lake, one method they use out there a lot is they've got long sections of riprap, the great big rocks the Corps of Engineers spread along the riverbank to keep it from eroding. And people will get off those riprap banks and they'll put bait underneath a big float 6 or 8 feet deep. And it may be chicken liver, you know, chicken breast, whatever. And they'll throw it out there close to that riprap with that bait about 6 or 8 feet deep. And they'll just kind of drift along, letting that float drift along that riprap. And they catch a lot of fish doing that. I forget, what was the second part on that?
Second part was just, would you use the no weight technique if there's lots of bigger rocks or debris around when you're fishing from the bank?
I'm not saying, you know, that you wouldn't. I have never done it, but it's just because that's not a situation that I fish in a whole lot. I'm typically in the boat, in the tailwater, and I'm wanting to cover a lot of water. But there's no reason, if you're in slack water without any current to speak of, there's no reason, I guarantee you, I don't care. I drift the tailwaters with no weight on that chicken, and I've gotten it hung on the bottom in 30 feet of water. If you're fishing it on a slack line, that chicken is going to sink. So if you're fishing in slack water with no current, I guarantee you it's going to sink to the bottom. You know, whether you put a weight on it or not. Is it going to catch more fish in that situation? I don't know. I haven't done it. I really can't speak to that. But I know that chicken's going to get to the bottom If you
Mhm.
throw it out there, it's going to sink.
All right, just a few more. Are you doing anything different if you're just fishing like a farm pond? I know that kind of fits in right there with what you're talking about fishing from the bank. But if somebody's got a farm pond and they're wanting to go catch some catfish, is there anything different you do there in that scenario?
Yeah, farm pond situations are typically it's going to be channel catfish. Blues do not do well in farm pond situations, or flatheads, either one. Usually, when you're in a small lake or pond scenario, you're fishing for channel cats. So you want to go with a little bit smaller bait. Sometimes the manufactured, somebody mentioned something earlier about the prepackaged manufactured baits, catfish nuggets you can buy. I think those things are pretty good for channel catfish. I hadn't used them a whole lot, but I feel like if you're in a situation that you're fishing for channel cats, I think those little prepackaged catfish nuggets would probably work pretty good. I'd be most likely to put it on a float, determine your pond depth. You want your bait relatively close to the bottom, but not necessarily right on dragging the bottom. And, if your pond's 12 feet deep, then, put, a long rod and maybe a slip float, and set it for 10 feet deep and throw it out there and just let her sit, wait on the fish to come to you.
Awesome. All right, one more question here. Um, let's see. Is there a maximum number of rods that you can legally drift with?
No, not in Tennessee. You can have as many rods on the boat and in the water as you can afford to buy. Years ago, and there is, like on Dale Hollow, I know there is a rod limit. A lot of people were smallmouth fishing. And anyway, there might be. Dale Hollow is the only place I know where there's a rod limit regulation. But as far as statewide regulations, no, there is no rod limit. And I do know anchor fishermen. I normally will fish 5 or 6 rods when I'm anchor fishing. But I know catfishermen that will fish 8, 10, even 12 rods uh, when they're anchor fishing.
One last question we had from somebody that emailed in, and then we're going to sign off, is for somebody that's wanting to get out on the lake and go catch some catfish, but all they've got is a kayak, what might you tell that person, or what strategy might they try and go implement if they just have access to a kayak?
The first strategy you should use is go to YouTube. There's a lot of fishermen these days. Kayak fishing is getting so popular that there's a lot of cat fishermen out there, and there's several who have special kayak catfish channels. If you go to YouTube and you Google kayak catfishing, you're probably going to find a whole bunch of videos. Basically, it's the exact same thing. In most cases, most of them I know of and have seen and have watched on YouTube, they're using the technique that I talked about in the vertical drifting, where they get out, paddle out to deeper water, and they have rod holders on their kayak, and they put 3 or 4 rods down on the bottom, and they just kind of sit there and drift along with the current or the wind. Most of them that I've seen, that's the type of technique they're using. But absolutely, it's getting to be a big thing. Again, you'll find several people on YouTube who are specializing in catfishing out of kayaks.
Awesome. Well, Richard, why don't you tell everybody how they can get a hold of you and maybe set up a trip with you there in the future?
Yeah, just that's take your notes. We're Scenic City Fishing Charters, and website sceniccityfishing.com. I'm Richard, Captain Richard Sims, and there's my phone number if you want it. And I encourage people, I mean, if you have questions that we haven't covered here, or I didn't cover them adequately, or you disagree with me and you want to argue with me about something, hey, email me. I'd love to hear from you. You know, I'm going to answer them all one way or the other. So yeah, if you got questions, anything comes up, I encourage folks, and it doesn't matter if you're booking a trip or not. I don't care. I'm happy to answer your questions as best I can.
That's awesome. And we're going to be sure to link Scenic City Fishing in our resource email that we send out tomorrow. So you guys be sure to check them out. And like I said, Richard's there to help answer questions. And if there's anything I can do, I'd be happy to do that as well. So I think we've got one more thing I want to talk about right quick, and then we'll wrap up for the evening. So hope you guys have enjoyed this virtual class. We want these to be an easy place for y'all to come and learn, ask questions, do what we did tonight. And we make these free for a reason. We want them to be accessible to you guys. If you feel inclined to do so and you would like to contribute to the Federation to kind of help us keep producing this content, you can scan that QR code there on the left to make a donation to the Tennessee Wildlife Federation, but just also kind of in a way to continue to support these classes is that you can just keep signing up for the next one. Next week, I'm going to be back here. We're going to be talking about some fly fishing. So we've got a lot of fishing classes coming up this spring here over the next really 2 months between now and the end of June. We've probably got another 5 or 6 different types of fishing virtual classes, and we've already done some earlier this spring. So check those out on our website. You can sign up for the next one using that QR code there. If you're watching on your laptop, you can pull your phone out and scan that little QR code, and it'll take you right to where you can register. A couple other things I wanted to mention. We are having some different workshops coming up for fishing specific information. So we're going to have a big bass fishing workshop in the Nashville area later on in June. I think it's June 17th, close to Nashville. We're doing a big bass fishing workshop. So if you want to learn about bass fishing, that would be a great place to come out in person and learn from our staff, learn from other volunteers about what's going to go on there. And there's a lot of good things happening with this program. We are growing and heading in an awesome direction, and we're only going to be doing more of this. So be sure to stay in touch with us. We're going to start doing these things all across the state. So if there's not one in your region, let us know, and maybe we can schedule something nearby. So we want this to be a resource for y'all. We're going to send out some more stuff tomorrow. In the meantime, feel free to let us know how we can help, and we look forward to seeing you there. Richard, thank you for your help. It's a pleasure, as always, getting to have you on here and get your knowledge and just being able to share it with everybody. I know I always learn a lot. So thank you very much for taking the time to be with us this evening.
I appreciate it. I always like talking fishing, and especially catfishing. Yeah. 20, 30 years ago, when people talked about catfishing, it was kind of the redheaded stepchild. Everybody was like, oh, catfish. And nowadays, that's not the case. There's more and more of us out there that realize what an incredible, wonderful resource they are.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, and thank you all for the kind words. I hope this has been a good class for you. We'll look forward to seeing you on the next one, and hope you guys have a good rest of your evening, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Richard.
Good night.